everybody, this is Ryan. Welcome to the short video where we're going to cover the Form BRE, California Association of Realtors Form BRE. That's the Buyer's Representation Agreement exclusive. So all right, let's get to it. Basically, here's the bottom line. It's a contract that hires me as your agent to represent you as the buyer's agent. Some of the key points: lays out the time frame, lays out the commission structure and when you would potentially have to pay the commission, broker's obligation, property quarantine, scope of duties, buyer responsibilities, and then mediation and arbitration. All right, so let's just get straight to the form. All right, so here we are with the Form BRE. You can see right across here, Buyer's Representation Agreement exclusive. So let's go ahead and go through this. The main purpose of this, it's here to protect you. It lays out exactly what my obligations are, lays out what your obligations are also as a buyer, and it makes it very clear that this is here to protect you as the person who ultimately knows the least when it comes to purchasing property, right? So I've gone through the courses, I've done studying, I've took the exam and earned a license to buy and sell real estate, right? So unless you've done that, I'm willing to bet you that I have more knowledge, more information, right? So the person that knows the most is the one who's the most responsible. The one who knows the least isn't responsible. All right, so let's go ahead and go through it. Number one up here, exclusive right to represent. So this is where your name would go, that and of your significant other, spouse, anybody else involved in the transaction. So it's San Diego Real Estate Investments. It's the name of the agency. They're normally going to date this for 6 months. That's a pretty solid amount of time to find a house. Ultimately, going to leave the property section here empty. I'm not going to put any specific properties in because we don't want to limit your ability to find property. Right? So now obviously, if we're going to work together, you're going to get a copy of this to read through and then ultimately sign. So I'm not going to go through the entire thing. I'm just going to hit the main points. But number two, discover the agency relationship, so disclosure, buyer representation, etc. Some of the more important stuff as we get down here. Number three, compensation to the broker. All right, so notice the amount or rate of a real estate commission is not fixed by law. They are set by each broker individually and may be negotiable between buyer and broker. So keep that in mind. Section A here, the amount of the compensation. Right, so my compensation is 2.5% of the sales price. Right, and then ultimately, as a client, you're going to need to initial the buyer's initials down there. So there's page one. But now here's where a lot of people get hung up, and this can be confusing. I wish they'd had this on the same page instead of a page break, but oh well. So part B, right, compensation, payments, and credits. Right, so the buyer is responsible for payment of compensation provided for in this agreement. Right, so the buyer is responsible for the payment. Now the highlighted part. However, if anyone other than the buyer compensates the broker for services covered by this agreement, that amount shall be credited toward buyer's obligation to pay compensation. So what does that mean? Right? When a commission is paid, right, the escrow services will give the money for the home to the listing agent. The listing agent then pays the buyer's agent. All right, so if that happens, right, so if anyone other than the buyer, right, so this means the listing agent, the seller, escrow, compensates the broker, meaning the buyer's representative, that would be us, for services covered in this agreement, that amount should be credited towards the buyer's obligation. Right, so as long as the commission is being paid from the listing agent to the buyer's agent, the amount's covered. Right? So when would a situation pop up where this isn't covered? Right? And the answer to that would be off-market properties. Right? So if I'm able to go out and find a property to unearth a transaction that's not out there and get you into that house, I need to be paid for my time. Right? And it's the 2.5%. So normally I would go to the seller and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, are you willing to pay a 2.5% commission? Normally they are, but if they're not, simple walk around, just going to add 2.5% to the purchase price. It's the exact same thing that happens when you find a house that's on the market. The commissions are already accounted for, right? The seller already knows what they want to net. They're going to add the commissions on top of that, all right? So compensation, If anyone other than the buyer compensates the broker for services covered by this agreement, that amount shall be credited towards the buyer's obligation to pay. All right, so that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. As we come down, do have this part right here, 180 calendar day, right? So this is basically a property quarantine, all right? So the contract is definitely written to protect you as the buyer, to protect you as the consumer, to protect you as the person who knows the least when it comes to real estate transactions. All right, so that being said, it protects us because if I go out and spend 6 months working with you, finding homes, showing you homes, driving you around, putting in offers, etc., and then we get to a house where we find it, we identify it, we are ready to put in an offer, and then someone says, hey, you know what, I got it from here, and they try to essentially cut the agent out of the deal. All right, so that's the protection that I get as your agent out of this contract. Basically, any of the homes that we have gone and seen, I'm putting a 180-day quarantine on, so it basically is going to prevent you from ultimately cutting me out of the transaction. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but there are people out there that are less than scrupulous, and that has happened to agents in the past. So that's why we put the 180-day or 6-month quarantine on it. So basically, that's going to protect our work. All right, so Part D, timing of the compensation. All right, upon completion of the transaction, after escrow is closed, that's when we get paid. It's normally about a week later. All right, so there's no charge for our services. There's no upfront retainer. You don't have to pay for the gas to drive you around or any of that stuff. The only time we get paid is once we have done our job to completion, gotten you through escrow, you have the keys in your hand, we get paid about a week later. All right, so next big deal right here, broker authorizations and obligations, right? So what this is doing is you're basically authorizing us to do our job, all right, to locate and present selected properties to the buyer, right? So definitely take the time to read through this in person, right? Then again, we have initials on the bottom of page 2. We get into number 6, scope of the broker duty, right? So what this is basically saying, and again, read through B right here, the buyer acknowledges that I'm a real estate agent. That's what I do, right? I will help you find properties. I will comp them. I'll help you structure the offer. I'll help you put together the offer. I'll advise you. I'll assist you in every way that I can, but that's my job, right? I'm not a home inspector. I'm not a plumber. I'm not a tax person. I'm not an attorney. So I'm not going to give you advice that's outside the scope of my duties, which is being your realtor, being your agent. All right, so that's the scope of duty. Buyer's obligations right here, right? So buyer agrees to timely view and consider properties, right? Basically, time is of the essence, right? It is a very competitive market here in San Diego. You got to be on it, right? Time is of the essence, all right? So then we come down, again, initials here on the bottom of page 3. Last page, page 4, dispute resolution. So should there be some sort of dispute between us, it automatically starts with mediation, and then ultimately arbitration or litigation. What I've done is I have already activated the arbitration clause right here. So when you see this for me, it's ultimately going to be initialed, and I request that you guys ultimately initial the same, so we can go to arbitration in lieu of litigation. All right, so then at the very bottom, all we have here is the buyer information, where they're going to ultimately sign and date, and then you have the brokerage information, San Diego Real Estate Investments right here with their Calvary number, and then you got my information here as the agent. So, all right, that is short video going through the Form BRE, Buyer Representation Agreement exclusive. If you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out and let me know whatever questions you have. All right, make it a great day.